Hey class, wanted to talk to you a little bit today about public speaking ethics. You may have noticed already the chat a little on the brief side, and I wanted to be sure to touch upon some things that are pretty important to speaking ethically that weren't necessarily touched upon in the chapter. And so, starting off, as a speaker, you have certain responsibilities. We've already talked in a previous chapter about the speaking triad, or what makes a public speaker grab and keep attention. And those were ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, in this particular section, we're going to be talking about ethos, and this is basically what makes the speaker credible. So, why is it that an audience member should not only listen to you, but believe what you're saying? And we're going to find out here on the next slide that there are 4 keys that we kind of need to keep in mind in order to get and keep our speaker credibility. But before we jump into that, as a speaker, you have to think about some things as you're crafting your speech. So we need to think about why it is that we're going to be speaking to an audience in the first place. Are we looking to raise awareness, sell a product or service? Are we trying to persuade our audience? Or are we just trying to help them achieve a greater level of knowledge on a particular subject? And so, once you figure out your main thrust or focus, you can begin to then gather your information and put together your speech in a way that is not only effective, but also ethical. So, as I said, the 4 keys to speak by: good sense is our first one, and that essentially equals competence. So this says that we know our subject matter well, that we have researched our topic, that we're well versed, and that we have crafted our speech in such a way that it is not only effective, but that it is adhering to truth and ethical speech. In addition to that, we've also practiced this speech so that when we deliver it, we're not bouncing all over the place. We have composed it using our basic skills that we picked up in this class. So we have an introduction, we have a thesis, we introduce our main points, then we dive into our body where we talk about those main points, and then we have a conclusion where we once again reiterate our main points, reiterate our thesis, and then have a memorable closure. And so all of that works well and makes us look like a credible speaker as well. Key number 2 is avoiding ethnocentrism. And so what this is all about is basically thinking human nature that our group, the group that we belong to, is the most enlightened group out there, and that everybody else is just playing catch up. And so when we speak to an audience, especially if it's going to be a multicultural audience, very important that we avoid ethnocentrism, if at all possible, because the quickest way to tune somebody out, or to have them tune you out, is to speak to them like you know better than they do based upon the group that you're in. Our third key is using reliable evidence, logic, and reasoning. And how we do this is we go about researching our speech, and we ensure that the information that we are providing to our audience is true and correct. And so, for instance, if I were to be giving a speech on, say, a public figure, I probably would want to look at a very reputable source versus the National Enquirer or the Globe or something like that. Now, this is taking a lot of assumptions. This is assuming that, all of the periodicals and literature and everything else out there is true and correct. Sometimes there's bad information out there, but as far as we know, the information that we're providing is true. And then lastly, language is power. This says that we choose our words wisely and we stay away from overly emotional or offensive language. And this is very, very key. So as we structure our speech, we do so with our audience in mind. We take into account who we're speaking to, and we assure that we use professional words and that those words appeal to the audience that we're going to speak to. Logical fallacies. Logical fallacies are dangerous. They're dangerous to our argument, they damage your credibility, and quite honestly, any audience member worth their salt will pick apart our logical fallacies so quickly that we look like complete fools. Very important that we stay away from these. There are a bunch on this page. I'm going to touch upon a few of them that I see commonly, and I think that as you actually go through these, you'll recognize a few as well. The first one is the slippery slope. And this is a logical fallacy that basically says allowing one thing to happen, say, a ban on assault weapons, will start an unstoppable downhill slide into something terrible. Like, say, for instance, the government showing up at your house to confiscate all your guns. Now, that's probably not the intent of any legislator's ban on assault weapons, but a knee-jerk reaction and a tactic of a lot of institutions out there is to go ahead and appeal to a very flimsy argument that, well, if they ban this one thing, they're going to take it all. And so that's how we get people on board quickly without having to, go through the tedious nature of talking about facts and figures and plans and everything else because, well, gosh, that takes time. The second is the genetic fallacy. This is another logical fallacy where, it's essentially stereotyping. And this says that the origins of a person, a thing, or an idea necessitate stereotypical truth. For example, many people around the world think of Americans as rude, arrogant, loud, obnoxious cowboys. And when you think of yourself, would you typify yourself this way? Probably not. It's not accurate, and it's not nice. And it's not true. Another one would be ad hominem, and this is a fallacy that attacks another person's character rather than their argument. And this is huge right now. Think about all of the political debates going on. Think about Donald Trump. Many of his opponents are quick to argue that he's a crooked, manipulative, egomaniac bent on running the country like a reality TV show. Their time, though, would probably be better spent arguing that his ideas and strong-arm diplomacy will likely backfire, on a world stage. And that'll eventually lead to, increased conflict around the world, which, as an American, is not something that I'm interested in. So it's something to think about there as well. And I'm not saying, one way or another about Donald Trump even. I don't know what your political views are. You don't know what mine are. It's all good. And then the last one is ad populum. And this is a logical fallacy that says, hey, everybody's doing it. You should too. It's an emotional appeal to follow, not because of fact, but merely for a need to belong. And if you think about chapter 20 and the part about Hitler, this was his thing. It was, I'm a German, you're a German, Jews and communists are destroying our country. Let's, be German together, do something about it. And I mean, it's oversimplified. That's not where he was going with it at all. But I mean, he appealed very much. I mean, very, very gifted orator, Adolf Hitler. I mean, for all of the terrible things that he was, he definitely was able to give a good speech. And those speeches were about unification, and they were about solidarity, and they were about, the common worker being on equal footing with everybody else, and about German people being able to keep their wealth, and about children being able to grow up in a Germany where they could be proud as German citizens. And so all of those arguments appealed to German people, and he got them on board that way. What he didn't tell them, though, was that the unified, strong Germany that he was looking for wasn't necessarily to be their strong Germany. It was all about Adolf Hitler and his strong Germany. Had he shared that part with the German people, probably wouldn't have had the traction that he had. But you know how that turned out. Citing your sources. Oh, let me go back. More information on logical fallacies. Definitely, I would highly recommend you check out OWLS, the Purdue online writing lab. This resource has been around since I was in school even, and it's a great resource, not only for, this particular subject, but as well as citation and other things. So definitely check them out. And if you click on the link, it will actually give you a full write-up on each one of these. I would spend some time boning up on those, actually. Cite your sources. This is another trap that people fall into where we kind of get a little unethical as well. We often think of plagiarism as, just being something that is, strictly dealing with the written word. We copy from the internet and just paste it into our paper and call it good. That's plagiarism, and that's wrong. I know that. But we can plagiarize our speeches as well if we're not careful. And so, very important that we attribute our ideas to the sources that we get them from. And so there are a couple different ways we can go about doing this. There's blatant plagiarism, where we knowingly, go out and take Jim Bob's Second Amendment speech, delete his name off of it, put our name on it, rehearse it a few times, and go deliver it in class like it's our own. I mean, that's wrong. You know it. I know it. Does it happen? Sure. Should we do it? Nope. Shouldn't do it at all. The other one that's more common and that a lot of people get kind of wrapped up in unintentionally is the no citation plagiarism. And this is where, speakers give a speech, and, they've done a great job of going out and getting, amazing, evidence. And they've done a good job of putting everything in their outline. They craft their speech. But the one part that they neglect is to do their in-speech citation, and they don't include their, bibliography page for their speech. And so essentially what they're doing is they're taking that information and they're making it their own without giving credit where it's due. Now, there are some people, I knew one guy in particular who could rattle off the ERA for, pitchers in the National League. All of them. I was sort of a savant, but he could do it, and it was incredible. There aren't too many of us out there like that, though. So, unless you are just the subject matter expert in a particular topic, more than likely you've gotten your information from somewhere. And so very important that you attribute that. Respect others, freedom of expression. This sort of goes back to our ad hominem fallacy, actually. And so very important that as you deliver material, or as an audience member, as you are receiving that material, be sure that you are measuring them on the ideas that they present and not necessarily on their personhood, if that makes sense. And I have kind of given you sort of a double-edged sword too, because with the logical fallacies, I think you're going to find that not only is it going to help you craft a better speech, but I think that as you deal with other people, that you'll probably be able to point out a lot of logical fallacies in people's reasoning. And it's a tough place to be. I would definitely caution pointing those out, especially, if it's a spouse or something like that. You probably would, probably not just go ahead and throw it out there in their face. It's a logical fallacy. You're throwing up a straw man argument. That's no good. You're going to have to give me facts, or maybe you will. I don't know. But either way, as you're dealing with people out there and persuading, be sure that you respect their freedom of expression. So that does it. Keep it ethical out there.